Choosing Chrysler's second generation 300C rather than a conventional BMW 5 Series, Audi A6 or Mercedes E-Class will be a bold choice to make in the segment for full-sized executive saloons. But it's one that makes a rather unique statement, and a car that's hard not to like. British executives don't often think outside the box. If they did, our country's company car parks wouldn't be stuffed with Audis, Mercedes and BMWs. With the exception of Jaguar, no other brand has threatened the German domination here, and even strong names like Lexus, Volvo and Volkswagen have floundered. Which doesn't sound auspicious for the model that we're going to look at here, Chrysler's second generation 300C, and wouldn't be if this was just another aspiring executive saloon. Fortunately though, this car is, as it needs to be, rather different. You won't need to ask me how, just look at this thing. A design that, as with the first generation version, recalls the swaggering stance of the extravagantly designed 300 series model that characterised Chrysler back in the 50s, and does so again today. In the modern era, the company makes most of its money selling little rebadged Lancia hatches. But this is the car that really comes to mind when people think of this American brand. A car that was well received at the first generation version's original launch back in 2005 in the UK, when it was powered mainly by a Mercedes-sourced V6 diesel engine. It isn't anymore because Chrysler no longer belongs to Mercedes, adopted instead by Fiat. And the Italians were landed with the challenging job of redeveloping this icon for the current day, designing it to suit not only its original Yankee audience, but also would-be mafioso types to whom it would sell across most of mainland Europe, badged as a Lancia Tamer. Which is why, at the launch of this car in mid-2012, we ended up with this rather appealing combination of brash Americana on the outside and plush, emotively Latin sophistication within. In a model priced like a top diesel BMW 3 Series style compact executive saloon, positioned against executive four-doors in the BMW 5 Series class, and sized against luxury saloons in the bigger 7 Series sector. Sounds appealing? Then let me introduce you to the 300C. You can't help wondering just how a car that looks like this might drive. A massive, planet-polluting, but gloriously emotive petrol V8 should surely sit beneath the bonnet, as indeed it does, in the 5.7 litre SRT8 variant that Chrysler's UK importers declined to offer at launch. Instead, a request for a test drive in one of these will see your right foot flexing against much the same 236 brake horsepower 3 litre V6 diesel that's offered in Jeep's Grand Cherokee luxury SUV. Still, it's a refined and very willing unit, putting out 540 Newton meters of torque, good enough to push something as hefty as this 300C from rest to 62 miles an hour in 7.4 seconds, on the way to a top speed of 144 miles an hour. That's a little behind rival class contenders, but it's probably about as fast as most buyers of this car will want to go. It was a pity that the quick, slick 8-speed auto transmission developed for this Chrysler wasn't included on original Mark II models, cars like this one, fitted with a much older 5-speed gearbox. Slightly annoying too that you have to specify the top executive trim level to get the steering wheel mounted gear shift pedals that enable keen drivers to make the best use of it. Not that you're likely to be driving this car on the limit very often. The heavy weight means that it's not particularly agile through the bends. Not that this is the kind of soft, squishy yank tank we got used to from American brand imports of a decade or so back. Indeed, the original version of this 300C was one of the US models that changed all of that. And this car, if anything, is a little too firm in both ride and steering to be able to offer a driving experience deft enough to take on the best of its German executive sector rivals. Grip is good though, and the brakes are great. And of course, once you get this thing onto the highway, it comes into its own, a pleasantly unruffled driving companion, almost in the Lexus way, but with the advantage of the kind of big turbo diesel engine that the Japanese brand can't offer. What I think you'll really remember though, after driving this car, are the little touches. The headlamps that dip themselves in the face of oncoming traffic at night, and swivel themselves around corners to better light your way around the bends. The automatic temperature control system that's constantly monitoring the level of humidity in the car and that will automatically demist the windscreen even before you realise it needs doing. The driver's door mirror that automatically darkens itself in the face of dazzling headlights from behind. Or the way that if you've left the automatic rear sunblind down, then select reverse, it automatically pulls itself up to improve visibility. Now, some of these features I've experienced in other top executive cars, but only as pricey optional extras that most owners couldn't really justify. Here they're included as all part of the standard package, which makes you enjoy them all the more. You can see why the design of this car is so similar to that of its predecessor. After all, the look of the original was the main reason why people bought it, with its menacing presence and Chicago gangster-style vibe. Now, all of that will still shock the neighbours and your fellow sober-suited executives, just now in a more sophisticated way. Instead of the previous borrowed from a Bentley headlamp clusters, this car has more confident key slot shaped bi-xenons that sit either side of a smart chrome grille topped with the winged Chrysler badge. More prominent wing lines sit proud of a sculpted bonnet that leads into a more steeply raked windscreen. But from the side there were fewer changes over the original, with the same sporty low to the ground appearance. At the rear, vertical LED tail lights are connected by a chromed strip. Above it there's an integrated spoiler, while below twin oval tailpipes hint at the supposed performance potential of your gangster getaway car. It's easy to get carried away by the aesthetics and forget that we're looking here at a pretty hefty chunk of Latin American real estate. Thanks to this Chrysler's use of old-fashioned steel rather than more fashionable aluminium underpinnings, it weighs in at well over 2 tons, which makes it heftier not only than the BMW 5 Series style executive saloons it's pitched against, but also of boardroom barges like a Mercedes S-Class from the next segment up. It's also wider and taller than an S-Class, and very nearly as long too, thanks to a lengthy wheelbase that's greater too than that of top luxury class boardroom contenders like the BMW 7 Series, the Jaguar XJ or the Audi A8. Now, to be fair, it doesn't feel all that limousine-like from a seat here in the rear, though you do get more head, leg and shoulder room than you'll find in the other executive class contenders ranged around this Chrysler's price point. Cars not only like BMW's 530D, but also contenders like Mercedes E350 CDI, the Audi A6 3-litre TDI and the Jaguar XF 3-litre D. Knee room is particularly good. There's 20mm more of it than there was in the first generation 300C, despite this car's near identical exterior dimensions. A prominent central transmission tunnel limits comfort for a middle rear seat occupant, but heated rear seats are a novel and welcome feature. Where this Chrysler's substantial exterior size hasn't given it an advantage is when it comes to boot space. The offered 481 litres is less than the rivals I've just mentioned and isn't helped by the wheel arch impinged space and Chrysler's refusal to develop the estate version that buyers of the original first generation version of this car were offered. Still, the rear backrests fold if you really do need to carry more. And rather curiously, for a saloon car, there's self-leveling suspension should the packages in question be heavy. But in any case, I can't imagine trunk space being a real deal breaker for someone seduced by the styling and expecting to have to make a few practical compromises in order to make such a statement. What kind of statement the cockpit makes will be viewed differently by different people. If you're used to the cool pared back reservidity of the German brands, then the strip blue lighting, the faux leather, the 70s style auto gearbox gate and the shiny wood trim may jar a little. But it is different and of far better quality than before, even if a few pieces of down market plastic still do remain. Adjust to this new world and the news from then on is mostly all good. The seats are brilliantly comfortable and most of what you use and touch feels really beautifully tactile, from the leather stitched steering wheel with its chrome trim to the leather stitched finish for the dashboard. The instruments are really gorgeously designed with their chromed rimmed finish and a useful information display in between the rev counter and the speedo that gives you key driving data at a glance. Everything else you need to know is found on the huge 8.4-inch Uconnect infotainment colour touchscreen, the largest in the class, that dominates the centre of the dash, controlling stereo, climate, communications, navigation and other various vehicle functions, everything from the heated seats to the electric rear sunblind, which is just as well because so many gadgets are there that if all had been granted a button on the dash, it would have become cluttered beyond belief. Even as it is, mastering how everything works is not the matter of a moment, and some of the Uconnect menus can be a little confusing until you adjust. Once you do and discover that many of the functions can be activated by your voice, then it all becomes easier. My favourite feature? The heated and cooled cup holders. Lovely. This time round, 300C ownership is centred around a single saloon body style, with the range based around the 236 brake horsepower 3-litre V6 diesel with automatic transmission that I've been trying here. You do at least get a choice of trim levels, either the limited variant that costs around £36,000 or this plusher executive model that costs around £40,000. Now, you might expect that to significantly undercut the opposition, but in fact, this executive spec version's £40,000 price tag sees it priced almost identically to executive sector headliners like BMW's 530d SE, the Mercedes E350 CDI, or Audi's A6 3-litre TDI Quattro 245 PS. A still very desirable alternative choice would be Jaguar's XF 3-litre V6 diesel, which in luxury form will cost you around £36,000. About the same as a rarer choice in this segment, Volvo's S80 D5. And talking of rare choices, this Chrysler really will be a low volume car here in the UK. Only just above the numbers being achieved by really minor executive segment players like, say, Volkswagen's Phaeton 3-litre TDI or the Infiniti M30D. Both of those will cost you a similar amount. But none of these alternatives deliver quite the driveway statement that's on offer here, or the long equipment tally that goes with it. Both variants are extremely well equipped, with even the limited version getting smart alloy wheels, auto headlamps and wipers, heated front and rear seats, an auto dimming rear view mirror, You get Bluetooth compatibility for your phone, automatic dual zone climate control, satellite navigation, hill start assist to stop you drifting backwards on uphill junctions, an electrically adjustable steering column, and even adjustable foot pedals so that you can get them positioned just right, which is just as well, because without this feature the foot mounted stop brake might rather get in the way. Plus, of course, there's the Uconnect colour touchscreen DVD infotainment system with its voice commands and USB, iPod and SD card reader compatibility. Now, via this, you control a 6-speaker audio setup, upgraded to a 9-speaker 11-channel system on this executive variant, which has the tempting option of a full house 19-speaker 12-channel 900-watt Harman Kardon audio setup. Standard executive variant features include, well, you've got a powered electric sunshade, larger 20-inch alloy wheels, keyless entry, and heated and cooled Napa leather seats, among many other standard features. As for safety, well, there are all the usual electronic assistance features for braking, traction and stability control, as well as ISOFIX child seat fastenings, anti-whiplash head restraints and 7 airbags, including a driver's knee bag. There's also a neat brake drying feature that unobtrusively wipes the brake discs in the rain so that they're always ready to operate at their optimum. Owners of this top executive model get a lot more too. An adaptive cruise control system that keeps you a safe distance from the car in front on the highway. An adaptive forward lighting system that swivels the high intensity discharge headlamps by up to 15 degrees to better light your way around corners. A blind spot monitoring system that stops you from dangerously pulling out to overtake in front of another car. And a forward collision warning system that uses a radar mounted in the top of the windscreen here to constantly scan the road ahead for potential collision hazards. If one is detected, the driver will be warned and the brakes primed. If he or she doesn't respond or isn't able to, then the brakes will be automatically applied to reduce the severity of any resulting accident. Now, you might think that a combined cycle fuel return of around 40 miles to the gallon from something this big, powerful and heavy isn't a bad result. And in many ways, you'd be right. But that's to ignore the huge steps forward that rival German brands have made in this area in recent times, mainly thanks to copious use of weight-saving aluminium technology. So it is that a car that on the drawing board a few years back must have looked like it would be, well, near the front of the class in terms of running cost efficiency is now relegated to a place near the back of the chasing pack. That'll have an impact on whole life costs, of course, as will the 185 grams per kilometre CO2 emissions figure that rises to 191 grams per kilometre on this top executive model with its larger 20-inch wheels. You won't be surprised to hear that residual values aren't quite as high as those achieved by the German rival brands either. Although, thanks to this Chrysler's relative rarity, they won't be much worse than you'd achieve on other bit-part executive sector players like the Volvo S80 or the Lexus GS. Still, you can balance out a lot of this against the much better deal that you're likely to be able to negotiate on this Chrysler up front, along with the fact that, unlike on German rivals, you won't have to spend loads of extra cash that you won't get back at resale time on pricey optional extras that aren't included on BMW, Mercedes and Audi models, but are inclusive on this one. One little extra feature that deserves a mention on this Chrysler is the misfuel protection device that stops you from putting petrol into the diesel filler pipe. The value proposition also depends on your benchmark of comparison. I've assumed that it'll be against the BMW 5 Series, Mercedes E-Class and Audi A6 models that this car is priced against. But if you follow Chrysler's argument that this 300C is just about big enough to be considered against £60,000 luxury saloons from the next class up, then its value proposition and its whole life cost proposition therefore takes another giant leap forward. Insurance is Group 40 across the board. You might have to buy an executive saloon, but that doesn't mean you have to buy a boring one. Is this the most efficient, the most dynamic, or the lowest depreciating car of that kind you could choose? No. But will you care about that when one is scaring passers-by from your driveway, causing dawdlers to scuttle away from your path in the outside lane, or frightening children and small animals when you park outside the dry cleaners? Also no. True, you need a certain personal chutzpah to be able to carry off a car like this. And also, probably, given the likely running costs, a certain amount of influence with your company accountant. But given those two things, a 300C would make a very pleasant purchase. Just practical enough to be the kind of car you need, but also just wild enough, at least in part, to be the kind of hero car that life and circumstance always denied you a chance to drive, to own, and to lust over. Be one of the tiny handful of British executives who'll do something different this year with their day-to-day automotive lives. Choosing one of these may not ultimately number amongst your most sensible decisions, but it'll be one of the ones you'll remember most.